Hello and welcome back to the Renewables podcast. We have got an exciting episode today. Before we get into speaking to our guest, I'm going to ask my co-host Sam, how are you doing, mate?
Oh, very good. It's nice to be sat next to you this time instead of opposite. Usually we're sat staring each other down, aren't we? But yeah, we're sat together this time because we're doing a virtual chat today, and so we can both see the screen. We're sat next to each other, but really good. Another week in renewables nearly completed. So yeah, it's all good. How are things with you?
Very good, mate. We're recording on a Thursday, and like yourself say, it's been a good week. Without any further ado, for those of you watching, you'll be able to see Andy is with us. That's Andy Reakes. Am I saying your surname right there, Andy?
Yes, yeah. Well, that's
Yeah.
great.
I think I've made that mistake in the past of getting that wrong, so apologies for that one. How are you doing, Andy?
Y- Oh yeah, all very well, thank you. All very well. So busy time of year at the moment. I suppose moving towards a little bit of for us anyway, kind of committee board cycle, and for the EIC, yeah, lots going on in its 120th year as a charity.
I know we're going to get to all of that and what the charity's doing. We are just having a technical problem though. Your video doesn't seem to be working. I don't know if it's your end or our end. I'll just quickly check the Zoom settings.
And so I'm really looking forward to kind of trying to get a bit more information on what the charity
Mhm.
does. Not necessarily who it's helped in terms of names, but maybe situations that have come up where the charity's been able to kind of jump into action and help people. Because ultimately, there may potentially be a good amount of money sat there ready for helping people, but it's the fact that people don't know that it's there and therefore can't really call on it to help. So I'm looking forward to learning a bit more about that and yeah, and broadcasting that out to everyone that is watching and listening to the podcast.
Are you still there, Andy?
I am. Can you hear me fine?
Well, it's
Apolo-
good. It's actually quite a good picture to be still on. You're not picking your nose or anything like that, so it's fantastic. So we'll probably just crack on with that, and
Sure.
yeah, as long as we can hear you, that's the main thing. Because a lot of people listen to this anyway, so I think that's good. So
Yeah, so Andy, what's your primary role at the Electrical Industries Charity? Before we get into what the charity does, what are you doing there yourself?
Sure. So I'm one of the trustees for the charity. So sitting on the board, advising on strategic direction, some of the, I suppose, oversight that is needed for a fair size charity that the EIC is. I've been, I suppose, involved with the charity for probably 9 or 10 years now in one form or another through a couple of kind of formal board structures, a little bit through other charity work that I do and through other organisations that I work with. And then as of November, I've stepped in as vice president for the charity as well and do a 2 year term, supporting Alison, who's come in as president as well at the same time. So we're now kind of going through a bit of a review cycle on what the charity should be doing over the next kind of 2 years, and trying to make sure that, as you said, we are spending money ultimately in the areas that gets the most impact, that benefits the industry in the best way, as well as doing a lot of fundraising activities, a lot of promotional activities on some of the services that the charity offers.
Yeah, so I guess the headline funding for this year is the 120 years of the charity's existence and this £120,000 target that you've set, which is no small target to aim for, I've got to say.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've always been blown away by the support that comes through for the charity from various parts of industry, from manufacturers, wholesalers, contractors, from power generation sector. As I say, is quite broad in that terms, but something the executive team and Jess has put together for the 120th year, and a little bit of a stretch target, yes, but it's one that I think that they have already made some significant strides on. A couple of the campaigns you might have seen already, Jail or Bail, was started in January. There are a number of people that are doing 120 kilometer walks, runs, cycles, particularly across March and April, and lots of fundraising activities. Some of those quite fun. There's a kilt walk in April up in Scotland. Jess, as CEO for the charity, is doing a zip line over in Wales next month as well. So lots of activities that you can find out about, that lots of people are putting themselves out there to try and raise a bit of money. So yeah, £120 is what we're saying that we want people to raise. So not a huge amount each, but given the collective across industry and the potential, I think it's something that can, certainly be achieved. And we're looking forward to then seeing how that can be best spent to support those that need it most.
Yeah. So speaking about that support, Andy, I know from when I've researched the charity before, there's a few key areas that you try and cover, isn't there? Is there like a crisis part of the charity that you've got for people who really need some urgent support, and then some other elements to it that kind of are more set around employees, apprentices, and pensioners? Could you just set out some of the different strategies that the charity uses to help people?
Sure. So, as you say, the people that the charity supports is incredibly broad. And it does range from some dedicated apprenticeship support programs targeting those people, you assume are kind of 16, 17, 18 years of age, through to pensioner support program to people that have retired from the industry but still need support in whatever form. And that might be some emergency assistance, it might be financial hardship, it might be people that are working in industry, and that can be focused around things like industry well-being. The EIC provides what I think is quite vital mental health support, as well as financial intervention, as well as physical support services for people that need to rehabilitate and get into or back into industry. So ultimately, that is helping businesses retain talent. It's helping keep the industry healthier, more productive, reducing absenteeism. It's providing quite often a service that might not be there in all companies in terms of things like an employee assistance program, the ability to speak to the EIC's welfare team, and they do, I think, an absolutely fantastic job at being able to help people to manage stress, to manage mental health challenges, look at workforce well-being generally. And I think that gives a support network for industry as well. It breeds a sense of industry community. It brings together companies and different stakeholders and different organizations, different people. So it is a very kind of broad church approach to support. And while I think it kind of focuses probably into kind of key areas of financial support and direct intervention for people that might need something quite quickly. I think where the charity has really stood out over the last few years in mental health support, training and resources for organisations, putting something out there that I think really does make that difference, equipping employers with what they need to address the issues that we know come up. I mean, when I started in the industry, the biggest cause of deaths within construction was falls from height. These days, it's suicide. We've done, I think, very well as an industry to focus on the safety elements of working in sites and working in dangerous environments, perhaps not as much on the health as we should have done.
Yeah, I mean, it's such an important part, and it's probably always been there, the mental part of it. Whether or not, the modern age has kind of magnified the issue in terms of making it worse because of social media and all these other things that people are maybe, in their personal lives getting, starting to feel worse about their own lives personally, and then bringing that to work, and then something bad happens at work and all this sort of stuff. So you make a good point. Obviously, I've heard that statistic as well, that it's kind of moved from falls from height to kind of the mental health and suicide. part of things, and those sort of statistics are terrible. But at least we have those statistics to know what to target, and I think that's important for charities like yourselves to know what to try and target rather than kind of diluting, money across everything and not maybe making a difference in any specific sector. And I think if being able to target a specific subject and then effectively kind of look back as to how that is starting to hopefully help the situation, and hopefully through more people knowing that the support is out there, will mean that more people can reach out. You're always unfortunately going to get those people that don't, but it's worth reaching those extra 4 or 5, 10, 20, 100 people, whatever it is, by them knowing that support is out there and that there is a pot of money there to support them, even if it's not financial issues, but it's like you said, the mental health support, and just being able to talk to someone about the problems that they're having. So one thing that I was wondering about this was, how do people actually get kind of involved with the charity in terms of, one thing, identifying that they've got a problem either financially or illness or, mental illness or physical illness, but how do they kind of reach out to you guys to get support, and what's the sort of general kind of things that you would support on, and how do they kind of start that process of hopefully getting some support?
Sure. So there is a support helpline number, which is 0800 652 1618. And that is still where a lot of initial inquiries come from. And I think that there is a value in having people that can, I suppose, talk through some of these issues, and there's a dedicated welfare team that look into effectively cases that come through and dealing with issues, and that can be, again, very broad in terms of the types of topic that they deal with. So we've talked about kind of mental health support, but it also includes things like bereavement counselling, can also lead into legal advice. I know situations in the past where people have been made homeless by potentially no fault of their own, and then what the charity can do to try and assist in those circumstances. And that it might be, I suppose the crisis intervention piece is an interesting one, because I think you're right that it's about how the charity ultimately spends its money and what it funds for best use in the industry. And that might not always be direct resources from the charity, but it might be putting you in touch with the right organisation and the right people that can do that job best. So, and that ultimately is trying not to duplicate efforts elsewhere. The UK has, I think, more registered charities than any other country in the world. We are a very generous nation. And people like to give back. And the last thing you want to do is end up setting competing charities in spaces for services and funding. So some of the aspects that the charity will do in terms of those kind of day-to-day services might even be things like CV support following redundancy, job loss. That normally leads on to concerns around mental health. That might lead to concerns around financial assistance as well. Will support is another one that's been quite well used, and again, that would be through some partners of the charity to provide that. So it tends to be, I suppose, situations that can be quite complex, and I think, unfortunately, that its circumstances quite often lead into support being required in a number of different areas. We've seen, I think, particular issues over the and probably, unfortunately, growing issues with drugs and alcohol over the last 10 years or so. But again, it's what does that lead to? And it's not just, I suppose, addressing those root cause, but perhaps psychiatric assessments that might be needed to kind of support the individual in those circumstances, as well as perhaps that emergency intervention or that emergency financial assistance that's required. So that's normally, have a conversation with the team. People can also contact charity by email. The kind of general helpline is support@electricalcharity.org. You can also find the Electrical Industry Charity on social media platforms, so Facebook, Instagram, X, LinkedIn, YouTube, etc. So there are resources out there. There is contact out there. Go on the website, go on electricalcharity.org, and drop the charity an email and speak to somebody. I think just reaching out in itself is normally quite a big task. So do that in a way that suits you best, and hopefully that'll at least start the conversation.
That's so true. It's when we're at that reactionary stage that people take the steps to get help, is when it's so difficult. So it's interesting to hear that you're doing work more preventing people ending up in those circumstances by supporting employers with training around first aid aimed at mental health. Is that something that employers across the board can access in the electrical industry through you guys? Do you offer kind of training to look out for those things to try and stop it being a problem before it is a problem, if that makes sense?
Yeah, absolutely, Mark. And that's always been my, I suppose, personal perspective on this, that it's probably one of the reasons that the EIC is perhaps in some sectors a little underutilized, or people may not be aware. It's you end up being that kind of victim of your own success. If you put in place some really good resources, really strong training, but do people realize what else sits behind that? And yeah, you're right. The training programs have been firstly incredibly popular. There were thousands of sessions have been run, or for thousands of mental health first aiders trained up over the last few years. That's predominantly now through a learning management system and solution, but there are lots of dedicated sessions, both online and in person, that can be undertaken. And the idea was that the EIC can provide a complete solution for that employee training on, I suppose, not just identifying some of the typical problems. We talk about bereavement or inclusion in diversity, suicide, loss, challenging conversations, how that might lead through to conversations on things like neurodiversity. But it can also be tailored. So if there is a particular area that an employer or an organization feels as though that they might not be addressing, then again, there's some services there. And although there are chargeable services for companies, that money is then reinvested to support, quite often, and particularly in some of the larger organizations, their own workforce, their own employees. I don't think companies are always aware, and why should they be aware, of how much the EIC is doing to support their workforce. Again, a conversation that I'm always quite keen to have with businesses, where you can say, this is what it would have cost you if you were putting in place your own employee assistance program, your own support networks, etc. And I think opening their eyes sometimes on the kind of good that the charity is doing.
Yeah, I think it's it's a bit eye-opening for me, because I've come into this not blind, but I've come into this with my own assumptions of the charity really being there for if an electrician, hurts themselves and they need some financial support to basically, get back on their feet, then basically money will be given out. But this is so much wider than that. It's basically for people that are just in the industry that need some support of basically varying different things. I've just listed a few things down there. Sort of first aid training, will support, illness, both physical and mental illness, bereavement, financial issue, financial help. But there's loads more that I've missed because I've only started writing it down. And so really it's not necessarily a handout for people that are hitting hard times financially, or through losing their job, or being injured whilst working. It's really help for anyone in the electrical industry that has hit any type of hard time, both financially, needs more training, illness in whatever form. So it's basically just almost like a blank canvas of help. And like you mentioned, you might not be able to offer that in-house, but it might be that a great first port of call for anyone in the electrical industry to go, I don't really know who to call, so I'm going to call Electrical Industries Charity.
Absolutely.
To basically say, who do I go to next if they can't support me directly?
Yeah, 100%. and that's what I would say. I mean, I've talked about kind of apprentices to employees' pensions, but there might also be family support that's required. There's lots of people that are full-time carers, so it might not actually be the individual that's working in the industry. It might be their family member that needs that support. And again, there's an employee family support program the charity runs. So yeah, I think that is absolutely the right approach. Speak to the EIC, because even if the team or the charity is not able to support you directly, they can direct you to the best person, the best organisation that can provide that. So yeah, there is a huge amount that the charity does, probably too much at times, but it's been, I think, a vital lifeline and support network for tens of thousands of people. So yeah, well worth referring, well worth knowing as well. I think it's great if you've got a mental health first aider, or you've got just somebody within the workplace that you can speak to about these issues. And I'd say fantastic. That should be the person you trust, and you have that port call. But that's not always there. So if it's not, the EIC is there to support us as well.
Yeah, I mean, I know firsthand of a couple of people who've received support from the electrical industries charity when they've gone through some really difficult things, and they speak very highly of the support they've been given as well. So that's the other thing. It's well and good that people come forward with good intentions, but it's really vital that the right advice and support is given. And I think having that there in the electrical industry, and we know that work's been done by you guys to ensure that that is what is happening, is critical to all of this around the fundraising. So obviously there is a good chunk of money that's coming towards you to best use for industry through your fundraising events that I've seen that take place, the charity balls, regular donations that can be made by anybody direct into the charity. So it's not so much of just trying to help, it's helping in the right ways as well, I guess, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's a whole regional network of people that support the EIC as well. So you've got boards, effectively committees and groups are set up of people all volunteering, all giving their own time to put a bit of a regional perspective on things, of what might be best suit and what might best suit in Wales, and necessarily best suit in Scotland. But also these are the people that are running the events. They're running the dinners. They're running I suppose some of the challenges to raise money as well. So yes, you've got things like Powerball, which is in November each year, and that itself will raise hundreds of thousands of pounds in one night. It is kind of one of the biggest funding generators for the charity. But you've also got a support network of over 100 people that do and have been giving up their time to support for many years, and then all of the quite exciting challenges that the charity facilitates as well and runs. So I did what they call it Arctic Adventure back in 2015, 2016 now, out in the Arctic Circle, North Finland, to do kind of 3 days of challenges through God's 20 feet of snow or whatever it was at the time, minus 25 degrees Celsius. But it was kind of that once in a lifetime experience. So it was difficult. It was a challenge, raised a great amount of money for the charity as well, but you can have fun doing it. And there are definitely some of the challenges coming up, like Kilimanjaro has been done in recent years a couple of times. There's a cycle challenge in September, which is Death Valley to LA. And again, I think there's something like 15, 16 people signed up to do that now. They'll each raise a few £1,000s for the charity. It's such a great way to give something back and test yourself a little bit as well. They are not easy. It's, as I say, it's the network of people that really does that, and there are some fantastic organisations that have supported the charity for many years.
So if there is somebody watching and listening to us now and they fancied the bike ride through Death Valley, is there a route for them to get involved and kind of become part of the next adventure, or is it a case of you guys reaching out and inviting people? How does that actually work?
No, absolutely. Please do so on the website. So it's on electricalcharity.org. You've got a list of industry events and then kind of what's called the challenges for a cause. So the industry events are the some of the golf days. There's a new football tournament in Scotland that's going ahead this year. There's a summer social in London. There's barbecues, there's sportsmen's dinners, and things like the Powerball. So if you want to come along to those as a company, as an individual ticket or buying a table perhaps for your employees or your network, brilliant. Please do that. You can find out, say, information on each one of those in the region. But the challenges for a cause are some of the exciting ones as well. So on the page, you will see the link through to the challenges for this year, those that are coming up later in the year. So yeah, please do reach out. Always happy to have more people involved in some of those activities, and we'll be confirming the 2026 challenges in the not too distant future as well. So we give people a reasonable amount of time to firstly train, because there does need to be a fair amount of training and prep that goes into doing some of these, particularly if you're climbing mountains, for example. But also gives you time to build up that support network to raise that money as well. And again, the EIC and their team is always on hand to support with that.
So you mentioned there, obviously, it being about the people and what have you. What was your draw to this type of role as kind of like a career path? Because I'm always interested in how people get kind of involved with this type of work, and obviously get into the position that you are now in that at the charity. What was kind of your main drivers for that?
So I think I first started speaking to the charity probably around 2012, and that was because I was running a different charity looking at skills funding and upskilling for electricians. And I saw that what is kind of now branded as the Electrical Industries Charity, a different name previously, were doing some kind of similar work. So wanted to reach out, see if there was opportunities for collaboration and a bit of kind of direction back and forth for people that might be looking to, in this case, undertake low carbon qualifications or HNCs, ONCs, things like that. So we kind of built up this relationship and kind of the charities supporting each other. So charity was and still am secretary of is the JIB Schools Development Fund. And we started supporting some kind of mutual events and doing a bit of signposting back and forth. They asked if I'd get involved in that first challenge for a cause that I mentioned in Finland. And then after that, they set up what's called Emerging Professionals Board. So that was probably around 2016, 2017. Asked if I'd chair that. So got involved in that sense, looking after a few things like the Power Lottery that the charity runs as well. Again, different ways to try and reach out and obtain some financial buy-in and offer a bit of a reward and incentive for people involved as well. And then position on the board came up in 2021. So kind of through that, and I suppose knowing a few people that have been trustees in the past through different associations, different organizations, it was always something that has been quite close to my heart, and certainly one over the next few years that I really want to focus on supporting those coming into the industry and how we can broaden out the apprenticeship support program. So, kind of long answer to a question, but lots that has kind of gone on in the past, and always one that I've been very keen to promote.
Yeah, there's a lot of synergies there, I think, isn't there, between the work that the JIB do, which we've covered on another podcast, for those of you who aren't aware, on Neil Bridgman's show with Andy. So if you want to go and listen to a bit about that, that's all out there. And I think from looking on the website at the minute, Andy, with the Electrical Industry Charity, you're looking for ambassadors to try and kind of help promote the work that the charity's doing to get that message out there where people can kind of volunteer and work on the charity's behalf, raising funds and such?
Yeah, absolutely. So there's, as I said, there's I think just over kind of 100 people that are sitting across the various boards and committees at the moment, doing a fantastic job, putting a lot of time and effort in. But what we want is to grow that network, to build awareness. As I always say, there is no point in a charity effectively sitting there on funds that is not going to industry use. In doing so, should be able to get that message out there to the larger organisations as well, looking to support the charity so we can support them in effect. So, yeah, absolutely. There's always an opportunity for people to get involved if people want to do something at say a workplace level, if they want to do something in a personal capacity, if they want to get involved in one of those committees, then yeah, please do reach out. Easiest way to do that is probably to come through on the general email, which is fundraising@electricalcharity.org. We've seen a lot of people over the last few years that have set up their own challenges, their own events, their own fundraising activities. People have done free peaks challenges. There's a few people that have done cycle rides from London to Brighton and Land's End to John O'Groats and some fantastic events like that. So it doesn't have to be something that the charity organises. If companies want to go out and do their own activity, but have a cause, have a fundraising activity to it, then brilliant. That's exactly what we want to promote. So yes, always opportunities to get involved.
So in terms of, I was just trying to think there whilst you were mentioning about that, is what's the charity's biggest challenge, do you think? I mean, obviously the obvious answer there is fundraising. Charities are always obviously wanting to raise more funds, but would you say, because I was thinking in my mind there that obviously the more people know about the charity, the more people will be drawing help from the charity, but also more people will be fundraising for the charity as well because it's more well known. People can see it out in action and everything. So would you say that what's kind of the biggest thing that you would like to try and over the next year or two to try and really boost with the charity?
Yes, I agree. I think it's one that the board has identified as well as one of those biggest challenges of how do you balance ultimately the income and the expenditure. And as I say, when I first got involved with the charity, it was sitting on large reserves and it wasn't spending enough. And that's because not enough people knew about it. So the rebrand and what's happened, particularly over the last 10 years, has been, I think, a great thing for industry to get that name out there and spending a lot more. But when, and you look at the impacts, particularly during COVID, and the charity was spending a huge amount of money, but without the fundraising coming back in. And again, you can't run at those deficits forever, of course. So where we've ended up now is a good balance, in my personal opinion. What we want to do, and we had a good kind of board session on this last week, is to grow awareness of the charity, do it in a targeted way, identify those parts of industry that perhaps don't give as much back as are supported. Contracting businesses tend to be those where more employees are supported as a proportionate percentage than organizations donate back in direct fundraising. That tends to be because of the makeup of the organizations. I would say it's lots more SMEs. It's a lot harder to do that compared to perhaps I suppose the DNOs or some of the manufacturers, the wholesalers. So what we need to do is, I think, target that in the right way. And from my perspective, that starts with the people at the top, and having that conversation. It is probably a one-to-one conversation with Jess or the leadership team, or Alison or myself or one of the board members to have that conversation, open the door and talk about how we can support their business, how we can support their company, getting the message out that way. And in doing so, yeah, you will obviously increase awareness. I don't think we ever want to be in a situation where we're not shouting from the rooftops the good work the EIC does. And then I suppose our job as trustees is to think about how the team manage that. And again, supporting them in achieving some of those aims for fundraising. Fundraising is always difficult. It's always something that I'm conscious that people can only give so much, and there are so many people that give far more than but perhaps they should, but they recognise that cause. So that's a brilliant thing. We don't want to ever discourage that. Finding that balance is always the challenge, I think, for a charity, for a non-profit organisation in general.
Yeah, it must be a huge challenge. And I think it was Coventry Electra last year. I was on the safe isolation stand, and the electrical industry charity were just next door. And the guys and girls who were on that stand were saying it was kind of a change in approach they were making. Is that something that you're looking to do, to get out to be front and center with electricians and their managers at these events? You're going to be doing a few of the trade shows this year.
Yeah, it's definitely something that I say we're still looking at. I suppose the support from those types of shows, Alex and Hamerville, etc., is always very welcome. There are a couple of shows the EIC will have a presence at this year, including things like CEF Live. So it gives an opportunity to speak to people, to have, I suppose, a human face, have people on the stand that they can go over to, and even if they don't want to have those kind of conversations on the day, that's fine. But they've got the information, and we can support. So it's something that, as you can imagine, doesn't come without costs, even if you're not paying necessarily for stand place. And it's great that organisations can donate that to the EIC. But it's, again, how best we can resource. One of the best things that I think the industry does is when they're running events, they're always happy for somebody from the EIC to come along to do 5-10 minutes on who the charity is, what we do, how we support. And in that way, you're getting that message out to more people, more organisations, but yeah, not necessarily kind of hosting your own events and things like that, because they can be expensive. Not everyone is kind of able to give EIC free venue space for running events and similar. Where we can see those opportunities with partners in the industry, I think is a great thing to do.
Yeah, I was just thinking of the many hands make light work approach in terms of the donations, that if you were kind of around thousands of contractors, because that's when I first put my hand in my pocket and made a donation to them, signing up through the stand. And I think there'd be a lot of electricians out there who would kind of take the same approach if they knew what was going on and how they could donate. Maybe not through a big challenge as such, but just that regular £5-10 a month that everybody could contribute without really missing. And maybe trade shows are a good way of doing that. Social media as well. I'm sure you've got plans around that to try and broaden the charity's reach in terms of funds been raised. It's that awareness, isn't it, Andy? That's exactly what it is. It's trying to get people to know that they can gather this support, but also if you're in a position to help, even in a small way every month, that's there for us to do. I think a lot of people don't realise, and you've got your work cut out to try and get that out en masse, whichever way you approach it.
Yeah, and one of the ways I think people can most easily do that, support the charity, but without hitting anybody particularly in the pocket, is to look at things like Power Lottery. So I signed up many years ago, and effectively I treat it as a regular donation that comes out each month. So sign up through direct debit, and ultimately it takes a couple of minutes to set up. But you've then got a regular donation of It could be £1, it could be £3, £5, £10. It doesn't have to be very much, but it's a great way to support the charity on the ongoing basis. And you've got an opportunity to win cash prizes. So charity gave away 70 grand last year in prizes through the charity. So there's a chance to win £5,000, chance to win £10,000 once a year through that. It's monthly run. It's a really quick and easy way to do that, to support the EIC. So I'd say look at that. Sign up to the Power Lottery. Again, you can find the details through the website on that. And the other initiative this year that I mentioned at the start, the 120-year campaign, is we want people to try and raise £120. So we're not asking for, as you say, those big donations, which some people do achieve, and that is fantastic. I've seen people raising £10,000, £20,000 in the past. Absolutely wonderful, but those are the exceptions. 1,000 people raising £120 gets you to that total, that challenge for the year. So yes, lots of different ways that can be done. And if you want ideas, if you want support on doing some of that, particularly at workplace level, then again, reach out. We're always happy to help and things like that.
I'm learning so much about this. I think the biggest thing that's blown me away is that how broad it is. And when I was thinking about this podcast, I was thinking, well, it must have to be quite niche for you to be able to offer that support directly to, electricians or people in the electrical industry. But like you mentioned, you can be that gateway to move people to other services that have that kind of high end support that they're doing day in, day out. Because I was thinking, well, obviously a lot of large companies now have these, have welfare support and kind of mental health support in house. But I suppose part of the problem is how often that's being used, not only for people potentially looking to scrap it, but also for the value and the level of help that person who is the mental health, support officer in that company, how well they can actually support, because they're maybe only been used a couple of times a year, whereas going through a charity and being put through to someone that is doing it day in, day out, the level of care is probably better as well than maybe even an in-house person can offer, because this charity is being used day in, day out for that specific purpose. And you mentioned obviously not about trying not to repeat care and like repeat services when there's other services out there. And I think that is really important, because with a charity like yourselves, you can kind of create like a bit of a web to lots of other support that is out there that people equally maybe don't know about. So having that gateway where you go, right, if you're in the electrical industry and you're going through basically any type of problem, come to us, ask us, if we can help. And if we can't help in-house, then we can help by putting you in touch with a more specialist in that area who can help. And I think that is a great message to send out there to people watching and listening, because people that get themselves, or not even through their own fault, but just through life happening to them, can end up kind of being a bit worried about who to reach out to, where to go, and sometimes I just need to have a chat about what the next step is, especially if they haven't got people around them. So I think that for me has been a really important part of this podcast, is to really detail that it is so broad, and to basically start a conversation with you guys if anyone is going through anything. And equally, if people see the value in this, to actually get in touch and see how they can support and raise money to help those people that are going through all these hugely varied problems that you've just been through.
Yeah, as you say, the kind of the industry as charity sees it is over 1 million people in the UK. So that is across generation, energy, manufacturing, installers, contractors, retail, distribution. There's a lot of people there to support. There are lots of challenges. There are lots of different issues that comes up. So if the EIC can be that port call for them, then brilliant. The kind of the worst thing that people could do is stay silent, or knowing how confusing the landscape out there is, and as I say, the number of organisations, not knowing where to start. So, but yeah, we don't want people to feel like there's nowhere to go. If you've got in-house in-company support, brilliant. If that's something that, for whatever reason, cannot be used, or the person doesn't want to use that, then this is another option for them.
That's a good point about maybe not wanting to use that person because you sit down and have a coffee with them every morning, and it's maybe a personal problem that you're going through that you actually want it to be a step away from the working environment. I think I'd be surprised if that isn't quite common actually. If certainly if you're going into the office and you're always chatting to him or her that's in part, that is in charge of the mental health support or this, that, or the other, the financial support in the company, and suddenly have to go to them with a personal problem. I suppose that could be for some people quite a barrier. So knowing that there's that other means that effectively no one really has to know about is maybe a really valid point.
And
Yeah.
that's certainly something that I've seen. And I mentioned contracting businesses as kind of some of those groups where we see this the most. And figures that we looked at was last year was that about 8% of donations come in from contracting businesses, but 30% of expenditure is going on their staff because people don't know. Companies don't know their teams are being supported elsewhere. So what we can do to highlight some of that is definitely a benefit. Sorry, Mark.
Yeah, I was just going to say that is a challenging one from an employer's point of view because you often don't want to feel like maybe your boss is going to find out what your problems are as well. It can be seen as a weakness. It's a heavily, certainly in the installation side of things, heavily dominated by males. As much as we're trying to change that, we're bringing more females into industry, and there's kind of that historical opening up and talking about things. And I think that's much easier, just speaking personally, to do that with a third party like the charity rather than something internal to an organization. So no, I think the work you guys and girls are doing there is much needed. In fact, it's essential, and it's been there for a long time, 120 years, by the way, and it's one of those which is, I wonder what the percentage is that of industry that those million people are aware of the charity. That'd be an interesting bit of research if you've not done it already, because I think it's not as high a figure as it should be.
Yeah. I haven't seen that stats, haven't seen that survey, but the awareness piece is one that we recognise you need to constantly promote. Obviously, lots of people coming up to retirement, lots of people that enter the industry every year in various guises. So, you always got to think about that message getting out there.
Yeah, and I think leading on from what you said, Mark, about you as an employee, you may be going through something, maybe not even illness related, some sort of financial issue or bereavement and all this sort of stuff, and not wanting your employer to find out. I kind of referred that or kind of put myself in the guys that work for me, in their shoes and being like, well, actually, it's probably worse for companies that are slightly smaller because the team is a lot closer. If you've got an electrical company that's got hundreds of electricians, working on their books, then you can't physically be that close to a lot of those people because there's just far too many. If you're a company that has, between, 3 to 20 people, it's probably quite a close team, really. And so you get some of these real bad personal situations that people can go through that can just be through no fault of your own, just through the cards that you dealt at that specific time. I suspect it would be very, very hard, depending on how personal that issue was, to actually go to your employer and ask them to help you with some bereavement side of things. And I suppose even if they did come to the employer, a charity like yourselves might be a great option for the employer slash the employee to kind of reach out to and go, how do I actually now support this person, because it's not something we've ever dealt with before.
Yes, and absolutely, that conversation doesn't have to be with the individual affected. It might be somebody, it might be a friend, a colleague, a boss, whatever. That might be the starting point. You can only obviously help people that want that help. But there's no reason why we can't reach out and we can't support the business as well to put the structures in place that might give them the opportunity to come forward. And we've seen kind of campaigns over the last few years of mate in my corner and things like that. Of is it easier sometimes for people to talk to kind of that friend or that colleague or that workplace rep versus their boss for exactly that reason? Or is it, yeah, EIC provide that function, and ultimately, as long as a person is getting the support that they need, then that's what we want to say.
Yeah, I think that's a great point to kind of end our discussion on. Really, I realised that we're getting towards the end of this hour's chat we've had. And is there anything else you wanted to add, Andy, before we move on from that? We would like to bring you in studio at some point. I know you're a very busy person, which is why we're doing this quite quickly over Zoom today. But is there anything you want to add, and can we look forward to you joining us in studio at some point in the future?
Yes, yeah, absolutely. Just need to get diaries to align, but no problem on doing that. Obviously, the JRB and ECS is doing a lot at the moment to promote low carbon qualifications and the funding that is available for those from the JRB through skills boot camps and elsewhere. There is a big piece of work at the moment that's going on to better align the MTCs, the minimum technical competencies for organizations in that area as well. So I think we're in a better place than we certainly have been over the last 10, 20 years. I think we're at a point everybody's pushing in the same direction, trying to raise standards. And that's always something that, always happy to talk about, incredibly passionate about. From EIC perspective, just want to again say thank you for the opportunity and thank you for making the EIC your charity of choice for the year. That is greatly appreciated, and hopefully you can see some of the good work that comes from those donations as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's our pleasure. We want to give back, and we want to give back meaningfully to, our industry. Where me and Mark have been making our money, and we're dealing with every single day. And I think it was a really fitting choice for us to, with the podcast being fairly new, to give back directly to other people like us sitting here, Mark, isn't it? It's people. It could happen to us. None of us are immune from things happening where we need a bit of help. And so I think trying to raise that profile and just raise the issues that people might not think you can cover as well. But the last thing that I wanted to just say was, did you want to just give people, to save people rewinding this and trying to find the contact details again, did you want to just quickly, in a couple of minutes, just lay out how people can get in touch for support, for fundraising, and just more information about the charity to see if it can help them?
Absolutely. Yeah, thank you. So the Electrical Industries Charity website is electricalcharity.org. On there, you will find all information about services, about the support programs, around training, around the events, the challenges, what's going on there. The helpline number again is 0800 652 1618. You've also got contact information for email. That is best one is probably support@electricalcharity.org. There's a contact us page on the website, and it will give you lots of different options, lots of different contacts for different parts of the organization, from events, for the lottery, for business support. And on the page, you've also got support for things like out of hours contact, crisis intervention. So while that might not be the EIC directly, there's also links and contacts for lots of different organizations that can best support the person at that point in time as well.
That's great, Andy. I'll lead us out then.
Yeah, please
Max.
do so.
So yeah, thanks very much, Andy, for coming on and giving us that breakdown. I've learned a lot about what the charity can do, and hopefully everyone watching and listening to this has also learned a lot, and that's why we've chosen the IC to be our charity of the year. We are going to some shows this year as well. The main one we're going to is the Installer Show that very kindly provided us a stand there, and so we can talk about obviously the EIC, the charity that we're supporting, as well as all other things podcast related. We have some merch there and lots of other things like that. But the main thing is about getting the conversation started. The podcast was intentionally about renewables and everything like that. But if we can help people in the renewables industry and in the electrical industry and kind of all that mixture to get support when they need it, then that is a job well done. So yeah, thanks very much, Andy, for coming on. Thanks very much for watching and listening. Please subscribe, like, leave any comments, and of course, visit all the helplines that the IC provide if you are going through some difficult things. So thanks very much, everybody, and we'll see you on the next one.